You know what's fascinating about someone who's never set foot on a production floor? They look at a budget spreadsheet and see numbers. They don't see the ammonia. They don't see the bandsaws. They do not see the 19 ways a building full of heavy machinery and refrigerated gas can kill somebody on a Tuesday morning. This one is about a woman who kept people alive for 11 years and the cost optimizer who decided that she was a luxury. Stay to the end for my take, and I want to see yours in the comments. Ruth Wellen, 11 years as Environmental Health and Safety Manager at Heartland Premium Meats in Grand Island, Nebraska. If you have never been inside a meat packing plant, let me paint the picture. 42 degrees on the production floor year-round. The smell hits you in the parking lot, blood and refrigerant and industrial cleanser, layered like geological strata. 230 workers on the day shift, running bandsaws, deboning knives, and vacuum sealers at a place that would make your hand shake. My job was making sure they all went home with the same number of fingers they arrived with. I maintained every OSHA 300 log, every lockout tagout procedure, every hazard communication binder. But the thing I spent the most time on, the thing nobody ever asked about, was the ammonia system. Heartland runs an anhydrous ammonia refrigeration loop, 22,000 pounds of it circulating through pipes above the production floor. Process Safety Management, PSM, is the federal program that keeps that system from becoming a mass casualty event. I maintain the mechanical integrity schedule, the process hazard analyses, the emergency action plans, every quarterly inspection, every valve test, every pressure reading, documented, dated, filed in my system, my handwriting on every entry. I had a nickname for the binder, called it Gerald, 3 inches thick, top drawer of my filing cabinet. If Gerald ever went missing, the EPA and OSHA would both come knocking on the same day. Nobody ever asked about Gerald. I liked the early mornings best. 5:45 before the shift, walking the floor alone with my clipboard and my coffee, checking exit routes, verifying eye wash stations had not been blocked by pallets again, tapping the pressure gauges on the ammonia lines out of habit. The fluorescent lights buzzed a specific frequency that I swear I could feel in my back teeth. 11 years of that hum. It was mine. The plant had been family-owned since the 80s. The Myers built it, ran it, sold commodity beef to regional grocery chains. Solid operation, not glamorous. Then in March, Ridgeline Capital Partners acquired Heartland as part of a 6-facility portfolio deal. Standard private equity playbook, buy, cut, flip. That is when Tanya Sievert arrived. She walked through the production floor on her first day in heels. Open-toed heels, on a floor where we require steel-toed boots, because a deboning knife hit the concrete at ankle height in 2019, and we never forgot it. I watched her pick her way between the drain grates like she was navigating a puddle on Michigan Avenue. She did not introduce herself to me. She introduced herself to the plant manager, the production supervisor, and the head of logistics. I was standing right there holding the visitor safety waiver she had not signed. She shook 3 hands and walked past me like I was part of the wall. Her title was Operations Director. Her background was financial consulting, 6 years at a cost optimization firm that specialized in post-acquisition integration. She had a degree in organizational management. She had never worked at a facility where the product arrived alive. Within a week, she had requested headcount reports for every department. Mine came back flagged in yellow. 4 full-time safety staff plus me, she wrote in an email I was copied on, seems heavy for a mid-sized facility. She spelled anhydrous wrong. She spelled it anhydrous. I corrected the spelling in my reply and attached the OSHA staffing guidelines for PSM-covered facilities. She did not respond. That was April. By May, she had cut my training budget by 60%. She did this during a department review meeting where she told me, and I am quoting exactly, that safety training was a non-revenue activity and needed to be evaluated through a cost per unit lens. I asked her what unit she meant. She said output unit. I said, per carcass. She stared at me for 2 full seconds, smiled like I had made a joke she did not find funny, and said, per unit of operational throughput. I stared at her, the way you stare at someone who just called a cow a unit of operational throughput. In June, she walked the production floor during a shift with 2 Ridgeline analysts. No hard hats. I handed all 3 hard hats from the rack. Tanya took hers, looked at it, and set it on a shelf. She said, "We need to move past the compliance theater and focus on operational performance metrics." She was standing 4 feet from a man operating a bone saw. I said, "That is not theater. That is 29 CFR 1910.135. She turned to her analysts. This is what I mean about culture. People here think in regulations instead of results. One of the analysts laughed. Danny Reeves, 17 years on that floor, looked at his boots and said nothing. Then came Monday, the all-hands meeting. Tanya stood at the front of the break room with a PowerPoint that said, Motivational Restructuring, Building an Accountability Culture. She explained that Heartland was transitioning to performance-indexed compensation. Every hourly employee, effective immediately, would have their base pay reduced to federal minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, with the opportunity to earn back through quarterly performance benchmarks. The room went dead silent. 230 people processing that they had just been told their pay was being cut by 70-80% overnight. I stood up. I did not plan to, but I stood up and I said, "Which OSHA record-keeping requirements do you plan to maintain when your safety-certified workforce walks out tomorrow?" She smiled. That same smile. "Ruth, compliance is a mindset, not a budget line. We will cross-train for any coverage gaps." I sat down. I did not say another word, because I knew what happens when you cross-train a 19-year-old kid who has been on the floor for 2 months to manage ammonia PSM documentation. Nothing. That is what happens. Nothing gets documented. And then something leaks. Danny Reeves caught me in the hallway afterward. He looked like he had not slept in days. He said, "Ruth, what do we do?" I said, "I honestly do not know, Danny." That was Tuesday. On Friday, I was called into Tanya's office. She had HR on speakerphone, not even in the room, on speaker, like she was ordering lunch. She told me my position was being eliminated as part of the lean headcount model. She said I had demonstrated resistance to cultural alignment. She said Ridgeline appreciated my years of service. She said all of this while checking her phone. I nodded. I said, "I understand." She looked up. She was expecting something. An argument. A list of reasons. Tears. She got nothing. That is okay. HR will walk you through the details. I said, of course. I went to my office. I took my personal photographs off the wall. I took my coffee mug, the one that said, "This meeting could have been an OSHA citation." I opened the top drawer of my filing cabinet and took Gerald, the ammonia PSM binder, 3 inches thick. My handwriting on every page, 11 years of mechanical integrity records. That was mine. I built it. Every page. Was I supposed to leave it? For whom? I walked through the production floor one last time. Danny was not there. The fluorescent lights still buzzed at that frequency. The pressure gauges on the ammonia lines read normal. I checked them out of habit one last time. The way you touch the door handle when you're leaving a house you will not come back to. The parking lot was hot and bright, Nebraska in July. I sat in my truck for maybe 2 minutes. I let one breath out, a long one, the kind you hold without knowing you're holding it. Then I drove home. She just walked out of a building where 22,000 pounds of ammonia circulates above the production floor. The only person who tracked that system just drove away with a binder in her passenger seat. Subscribe now, because what happens next at the plant is the kind of thing that ends up on federal databases. The first call came 9 days later. It was Danny. Ruth, where is the PSM binder? I was elbow deep in potting soil, transplanting tomato seedlings I've been neglecting since March. My knees were in the dirt. My phone was on speaker on the porch railing, and Danny sounded like a man standing in a room where alarms were going off. Which part? I said. The whole thing, the mechanical integrity records, the process hazard analysis, the contractor files. Tanya told Marcus to handle it, and Marcus cannot find anything. Marcus was 23. He had been in the safety department for 5 months. He was a nice kid. He could not have found the PSM binder if it were taped to his forehead. Danny, that documentation was maintained in my filing system, in my office. Your office got converted to a breakout space. I paused. I set down my trowel. When? Monday. They converted my office to a breakout space. They threw out 11 years of safety documentation to make room for a couch. I told Danny I could not help. I said it gently, because Danny had never been anything but decent to me, and because I could hear in his voice that he already knew what was coming. He said he understood. I went back to my tomatoes. The next week, Maria Gutierrez, one of my best safety leads, 15 years on the floor, texted me that she had quit. She said 8 other experienced workers had already left. The ones who stayed were working at minimum wage with no safety oversight. She said a kid on the deboning line had sliced through a tendon, and nobody filed the incident report because nobody knew which form to use. Then the ammonia leak. It was small, a valve fitting on the engine room loop, maybe a 2-pound release. In a functioning PSM program, that gets caught in the weekly inspection, logged, repaired, documented. Without the inspection schedule, without the mechanical integrity records, without anyone who knew which valves were due for testing, it sat for 3 days until a night shift worker smelled it and called 911 instead of following the emergency action plan, because nobody had reviewed the emergency action plan since I left. OSHA showed up the next morning. I heard about this from a former colleague who called me while I was eating breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast. I had started eating breakfast again. Actual breakfast. Sitting down. with coffee that I was not drinking while speed walking to the ammonia lines at 5:45 in the morning. It was remarkable how good eggs tasted when you were not calculating incident rates in your head. The inspection took 4 days. They found 19 open violations, lapsed PSM documentation, missing mechanical integrity records, expired contractor certifications, incomplete process hazard analyses. The emergency action plan had not been updated since I left. 4 required quarterly inspections had simply not happened. The eye wash stations on the east side were blocked by pallets. Again, Tanya's response, I was told, was to call a meeting about the inspection. She referred to the OSHA findings as regulatory noise and proposed forming a compliance task force to operationalize a response framework. She was trying to hold back a flood with a PowerPoint. The near miss happened on a Thursday. Danny called again. He said Tanya had told Marcus to reconstruct the PSM documentation from scratch, and Marcus had found my old email backups on the shared server. Some of the inspection logs I had sent to the plant manager over the years. Not the full binder, not Gerald, but enough fragments that someone who actually knew what they were looking at could have pieced together enough to show a good faith remediation effort. Marcus did not know what he was looking at. He forwarded the emails to Tanya, who forwarded them to Ridgeline's legal team, who asked for the original documentation. Nobody had it, because it was sitting in my living room next to a stack of seed catalogs. I almost called Danny back that night. My hand was on the phone. 11 years of instinct telling me to fix it, to protect the people on that floor who were not the ones who fired me. I put the phone down, watered my tomatoes instead. 2 weeks later, OSHA's regional office opened a formal investigation. They needed someone who could interpret 11 years of PSM documentation history for a facility running 22,000 pounds of anhydrous ammonia. Someone who understood the mechanical integrity scheduling, the inspection protocols, the contractor files, the emergency response architecture. They called me. I drove to the federal building in Omaha on a Tuesday morning, wearing a blazer I had not worn in 3 years. It still fit. I sat across from 2 OSHA investigators and a compliance attorney, and I walked them through every page of Gerald. I went back to the plant the following week, not through the employee entrance, through the front door, with federal investigators, wearing a visitor badge over my blazer. The production floor looked different, dirtier. 2 of the overhead lights were out. The pressure gauges on the ammonia lines, the ones I used to tap every morning at 5:45, had not been read in weeks. I could tell from the dust on the glass. Tanya was in the conference room with Ridgeline's attorneys when we walked in. She saw me before she saw the investigators. Her face did something I will never forget. It cycled through recognition, confusion, and then a very specific kind of fear that people get when they realize the person they dismissed just walked back in with the federal government. Ruth is here in an advisory capacity, the lead investigator said. She will be interpreting the facility's historical compliance documentation. Tanya said, I think there may be some context that is being missed here regarding our transition timeline. I opened Gerald to the mechanical integrity schedule. I showed the investigators the last completed quarterly ammonia inspection, dated 2 weeks before my termination. I showed them the next scheduled inspection, Dated 3 weeks after. It never happened. I showed them 6 subsequent inspections that never happened. Then I showed them something else, something I had not fully explained to anyone before. The ammonia loop at Heartland was 31 years old. The original installation used a valve configuration grandfathered under 1992 EIPA regulations, but would never pass current code. My quarterly inspections were not just compliance paperwork. They were the only monitoring system catching micro-degradation in those valves. Without the inspections, without the trend data I had tracked for a decade, there was no way to predict valve failure. The system was not just non-compliant. It was 2 missed cycles from a potential catastrophic ammonia release in a building with 230 workers. Tanya did not know about the valves. Tanya did not know there were valves. She sat across that table and tried. I will give her that. She said the compliance gaps were inherited from the pre-acquisition period. The documentation, in my handwriting, dated, sequential, unbroken until the week of my termination, said otherwise. She said the pay restructuring was standard post-acquisition practice. The investigator asked her if she understood that PSM-trained safety personnel are a regulatory requirement, not a performance incentive. She said workforce optimization decisions were made at the portfolio level. She was still speaking vapor in a room full of people who only understood steel. Ridgeline Capital pulled her out of Heartland that week. Not quietly. The citations named her individually as the responsible party for the staffing decisions that created the compliance failures. 6-figure penalties across multiple categories. The regional OSHA office flagged her name in their enforcement database. When Ridgeline's other portfolio facilities were audited, the scrutiny she brought to their entire operation. 2 more showed gaps that traced back to her cost models. The consulting network she came from stopped returning her calls. I did not go back to Heartland. They asked. They offered me my old salary plus 30%, a direct report to the new plant manager, full restoration of the safety budget. I said no. That is the part people argue about. 11 years. Those were my people on that floor. Danny was still there. The workers who stayed through the pay cuts, through the chaos, through the ammonia leak, they were still there. And I said no. I said no because I had spent 11 years keeping a building safe for people who did not know my name. And the company that owned that building converted my office to a breakout space 3 days after I left. I said no because Gerald should never have needed to leave the building in the first place. I consult now. 3 regional processing facilities. I built their PSM programs from the ground up, and I maintain them on contract at a rate that would have made Tanya's cost per unit spreadsheet catch fire. I teach an OSHA certification course at Central Community College on Thursday evenings. My students are mostly floor supervisors trying to protect their crews. Heartland is still operating. They hired 2 full-time safety directors. Because it turns out one person doing the work of 2 for 11 years was not lean staffing. It was negligence nobody noticed. Tanya Sievert is not in meatpacking. She is not in manufacturing. Last I heard, she was doing independent consulting for a firm that helps companies with workforce transition strategies. I check the ammonia pressure gauges in my 3 facilities every Monday morning at 5:45. Old habit. The fluorescent lights buzz at a different frequency in each building. I am learning the new ones. Gerald sits on my bookshelf at home, retired. He earned it. Well, here's my take. The thing that kills me about this one is not the 19 violations. It's the open-toed shoes. That tells you everything. You walk onto a production floor where people lose fingers, where ammonia runs through the ceiling in open-toed heels, and you think you are qualified to restructure the safety budget. Tanya did not respect Ruth. Tanya did not even see Ruth. She looked at a spreadsheet and saw a salary. She did not see the woman standing between 230 people and a chemical disaster. And then she called compliance a mindset. Compliance is a mindset. You know what else is a mindset? Thinking you can cut the pay of every safety-trained worker in a building full of ammonia and call it motivation. Here's my request. Ruth said no when they offered her the job back. Full salary, bigger budget, direct report line, and she walked away from the people she had protected for 11 years. Right or wrong call? Tell me in the comments because I know this one's gonna split the room. Next video's on the screen right now. Tap it, and if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. These stories are only getting wilder.